Ask not what we all be can do for you. Ask what you can do for we all be.
State your name again.
I'm Sheri Johnson.
And who do you represent?
I represent Curtis Flowers.
And you're from Cornell University, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you just got to present the oral argument for the defense. What are your thoughts after presenting the case?
I think the court was very interested in the issues in this case, and I appreciated how invested they were in doing the right thing.
You feel like the prosecution presented a strong enough case to warrant the outcome from last trial?
No, I think the case is extraordinarily weak on its facts. It is riddled with inconsistencies. There is no direct evidence implicating him. There's really no credible evidence. And there's actually much more evidence, I think, implicating a third party.
Now, how reliable is witness testimony when it comes to IDing a suspect?
Well, that depends. Of course, if a person knows the person ahead of time or has long opportunities to observe or good conditions, great motivation, eyewitness testimony can be reliable. But this case had none of those indicia. This had someone who tentatively identified someone else, then identified the defendant, then was not so sure, had a very short opportunity to observe, and was not even paying that much attention initially. It was also from 30 feet away. So under these circumstances, an eyewitness identification is very weak. And I would also actually point out that it's not an identification of the perpetrator. He actually only identifies someone who was outside the store. So there is no eyewitness testimony implicating Curtis Flowers in the murder itself.
And also, with my understanding from listening to the oral argument, the prosecution said that the witness they had, the star witness, ID possibly 3 or 4 witnesses or suspects could possibly be the killer, correct?
She said that he identified 3 people ahead of time and then 1 after that, Curtis Flowers. My reading of the record is that he tentatively said, I think it's, and then pointed to a picture of Doyle Simpson, and then, but he wasn't sure, and then was shown another lineup and said, I think it looks like him, pointing to Curtis Flowers, and then was asked, do you know Curtis Flowers? And at that point said, I'm sure it was him.
So basically everything is based upon this witness who is deceased IDing Curtis Flowers as the suspect.
Well, yes and no. There's almost no credible testimony. Someone, Clemmy Fleming, said that she saw Curtis running away from the events. But there are 3 people who said that she was a liar, and that she admitted to being a liar. And there's no forensic evidence that links him to this offense, which is really quite unusual. But there are other people who saw him places that he might have been going connected to this. But actually, each of them describe him as wearing different clothes. So even that testimony is highly suspect.
So basically, you're telling me they're able to sentence somebody to death row on unreliable witness testimony with questionable character and no evidence tying them directly to the crime. It's possible to send somebody to death row.
They did.
6 times.
Well, actually, there were 2 mistrials in between when they had a racially balanced jury. There were mistrials, and when they obtained juries that were overwhelmingly white, then they did get convictions and death sentences.
So I'm also interested in the fact that they questioned so many potential black jurors more than they did the white jurors. And considering the jury pool, they come from a small town, everybody would know everybody to some degree, correct?
That's correct. And so they would know Mr. Flowers and members of his family, but actually white jurors, prospective jurors, also knew Mr. Flowers and his family and defense witnesses, and they were not questioned nearly as intensively.
And also the weapon in question wasn't even owned by Mr. Flowers, correct?
The weapon in question was not owned by Mr. Flowers, and there's actually no evidence that it was ever in his possession. In fact, it belonged to Doyle Simpson. There's no doubt that it belonged to him. He's the other person who was tentatively identified by Porky Collins, and within an hour or so after the offense, he ran to the police and said his weapon had been stolen. That's the only person that we know actually had access to the murder weapon.
Is Doyle related to Curtis Flowers?
No.
Okay. So, but Curtis was the only suspect from day one that they focused in on.
They did. And in fact, you know, the searching of the house, they never did a search of Doyle Simpson. They never did a gunshot residue test of Mr. Simpson. They just didn't pursue that lead at all. Oh, and I actually also forgot to say that a car which resembled Mr. Simpson's car was seen parked right at Tardy's Furniture Store right before the shooting.
Wow, that's incredible. So basically, like, there's no fingerprints were found in the crime scene of anybody.
No fingerprints found on the crime scene. No fingerprints found where the gun was supposed to be stolen. No forensic evidence of that sort at all. No DNA, nothing like that.
And they could sentence by the death row based on nothingness.
It is shocking.
Okay, that's crazy. Okay, so what is the next step in this process?
Well, the Mississippi Supreme Court will have to decide whether the prosecution discriminated on the basis of race again, and whether it misrepresented the evidence again, and also whether or not the identification was just too unreliable to be admitted. There are other issues in the case as well. There are an unbelievable number of issues, such as whether the evidence was even sufficient to convict him. But all those issues need to be decided by the Mississippi Supreme Court, and we are hopeful that the court will reverse this case again.
Wow. I have a couple questions. Was there a shoe print found at the crime scene by any chance?
There's a shoe print found at the crime scene of a Grant Hill Fila shoe, right, which there are several 100,000 of them made, and it is not clear whether it was even there at the time of the crime, because one witness did not see it, then came back and then saw it. But it is, and that shoe is never found at all. There is a shoe box that's the same brand and size found by Curtis's Flowers' girlfriend, but his fingerprints are not even on that box. That is the closest thing there is to physical evidence in this case.
It was like a size 10 and a half or 11.
Which is a pretty common size.
Right. It also is like kind of like finding somebody wearing Jordans. I mean, Gray Hill, everybody wearing Gray Hills back in 96, just about.
Well, and in fact, one of the witnesses, Curtis's girlfriend, testified that she bought this shoe for her son, and one of the other witnesses testified that she had brought that same brand and make for her children. So no, it was not unusual at all. And
I was thinking about what they're talking about the jury selection. It's like Bertha Tardy had a lot of enemies. So nobody else was considered as a suspect.
No one else was considered as a suspect or investigated, and not even Doyle Simpson, who was an obvious suspect, at least in retrospect, but even at the time, given that he reported this gun, which was the murder weapon, stolen, he should have been investigated.
But it sounded like a professional hit. That would sound like it. It's like I heard some things about Bertha Tardy might have some internal family problems. I don't know, but the family was never looked at.
I have no reason to believe that to be true. There's nothing in the record that suggests that. And I think it's impossible to know for sure what happened, largely because the police did not investigate this case with anything like the thoroughness that should be required in a single homicide, let alone a quadruple homicide.
So you got any last words or thoughts you'd like to share?
I hope the Mississippi Supreme Court will do the right thing and reverse this conviction.
Thank you, Ms. Justice, for your time. Appreciate it.